This is regarding 9/11. No drones at all, no planes at all. Project Blue Beam and Scud missiles, no. You have to remember, I think, because I know about, and I know about Project Blue Beam. It's just it wasn't part of 9/11. That's what DARPA wants you to think. I would say that's what the military industrial complex wants you to think, but no. Yes, Project Blue Beam, but that wasn't what 9/11. 9/11 was. There were planes. You say there are no plane. No, there were planes involved. Do you know how far back drones go? The technology is always 20 to 30 years ahead of where they tell you. That's part of the problem. That's a good way for them to keep people so much in the dark and confused. And as long as they're not asking questions, then they're happy. But the fact is that aerial warfare goes back, I mean, and the capabilities they have more than we know, 162 years. They go back so far that I mean, we've been told about drones what in the last 15 years or so. They go back way further than that. The use of unmanned aircraft in war goes back 162 years when Austria used pilotless balloons to drop bombs on Venice in 1849. In the early 20th century, the U.S. military recruited remote-controlled airplanes to serve as decoys or even to attack enemy targets during the First and Second World Wars. From the 1950s, these aircraft began to support troops with the aid of cameras, sensors, communications equipment, or other payloads. General Atomics Aerial Inc. Predator drones were introduced to combat in the mid-1990s and deployed in the U.S. Kosovo Air War. Other branches of the military, as well as the CIA, have also come to rely heavily on drones. So there was some photos released of the day of 9/11, and this is like supposedly they're getting Cheney down to the bunker because Bush was in Florida reading My Pet Goat to kindergartners, and apparently it said that not even Secret Service was covering Bush, but that Cheney was running the much of what was going on, which it was always the standing joke that he was the one that was running the show. But regarding, I'm going to show a couple of these pictures, and this was bringing in this continuity of government, which him and Rumsfeld had a plan altogether for decades about this. If the 15 photos are authentic, we have one damning scenario of Cheney in his office. If they are not, we have another damning scenario of Cheney in the Presidential Emergency Office Communication Center. The officially released photos, if authentic, show how little we know about what Cheney did between the time of the first attack at the World Trade Center and shortly after 9:35 a.m. And that's because he did not call for the shoot down of the plane that hit the Pentagon, and he had plenty of time to. In fact, it is said now that he called for a stand down. When he was allegedly evacuated from his office while the attacks were taking place, when his actions might have made a difference to the outcome of the crisis, he is seen relaxing in front of the television, contributing nothing to America's defense. It is awfully relaxed, but then who knows if these are legit. Because the whole 9/11 commission, which him and Bush were against, but it was instituted because the families demanded it. Because these photos were released in 2015. This particular selection of office photos released in 2015 appears to be a further cover-up showing Cheney's casual non-involvement in the military response from 9/27 to 9/36, during which an apparent stand-down allowed Flight 77 or some other fast-moving object being tracked to hit the Pentagon. If the photos are authentic, then Cheney was in dereliction of duty, as were those who were supposed to protect him. If they are inauthentic, which seems very likely, then they are part of the cover-up that has already been described amply during the almost 20 years since 9/11. The cover-up suggests that what Cheney was actually doing during the time in question is a carefully guarded secret. I hope in this paper to show that Dick Cheney responded to 9/11 by using devious means to install a small cabal of lawyers, most notoriously John Yoo, who proceeded conspiratorially in the next weeks to exclude their superiors while secretly authorizing measures ranging from warrantless surveillance and detention to torture. Some of these measures were which Cheney and Rumsfeld had previously been preparing for almost 2 decades as central figures in the secret agency planning for the so-called continuity of government. On 9/11, the 9/11 report confirms continuity of government was implemented. As we shall see, Cheney promptly ordered the 3 top figures in the Justice Department out of Washington to the designated continuity of government site buried deep underground. This allowed Cheney's cabal to deal instead, starting that same afternoon. As a consequence, since 9/11, we have seen warrantless surveillance, suspension of habeas corpus, and the militarization of Homeland Security on an unprecedented scale that is not just illegal, but an erasure of rights specified in the United States Constitution. The background of continuity of government planning. The origin of many of these measures, both their content and their secret planning outside of channels, was the secret continuity of government planning that Rumsfeld and Cheney had been engaged in since 1982. In the 1980s, 3 secret continuity of government, 3 secret COG provisions were roughly identified. The plans what they were was to suspension of the Constitution, turning control of the government over to FEMA, emergency appointment of military commanders to run state and local governments, and declaration of martial law during a national crisis. A secret contingency plan to surveil political dissenters and to arrange for the detentions of hundreds and thousands of undocumented aliens in the case unspecified national emergency. Between them, the two journalists thus pointed to the content of the surveillance, detention, and militarization measures, which after over a decade of further refinement was finally implemented on 9/11. They also indicated how secret, extra-constitutional, and unaccountable was the process of continuity of government planning. In 1991, CNN revealed for the first time that North and FEMA were under a secret national program office in charge of continuity of government planning, known in the Pentagon as the Doomsday Project. It called the NPO a shadow government about which you know nothing. And in 2004, 2 authors, James Mann and James Bamford, wrote that in the 1980s, 2 central figures guiding North in the doomsday planning, which Mann called extra legal and extra constitutional, had been Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. The new details from Bamford and Mann about this multi-billion program were invaluable, but unfortunately both men believed, because of very misleading stories in the New York Times, that under Clinton, officials decided to abandon the programs as an outdated legacy of Cold War. Both men were wrong. All that had been abandoned was the original and completely honorable purposes of continuity of government planning under Truman and Eisenhower to deal with the catastrophic events of an atomic attack. I'm going to follow this up because I ran out of time and there's more people should know about what went on during 9/11 while planes were being flown into buildings.